Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my video on Fromsoft's most fabulous weapons. But first, the introduction. Since the dawn of time, I've thought of 25 of my favourite weapons for this video, and that's a nice hefty number because it means I get to chuck in a few picks that a lot of you Souls perverts might not necessarily expect. Which brings me to number 25, the Mastodon Halberd from Dark Souls 2. Like almost every weapon on my list today, first time you see this one it's being wielded by a foe, in this case the towering tusked tyrant standing guard at the entrance to the doors of Pharos, a level which, PvP aside, isn't really very good. The Mastodon Knights on the other hand are a damned good enemy. Big, intimidating and fun to fight, and hey, its halberd's pretty damn neat too if I may be so bold as to say so. Though if you want to see these elephants with a bit more of a sheen on them, why not head over to the stairs leading to Drang Lake Castle where a pair of them can be found, looking far less rusted and all the more imposing for it, very handsome. If you want their Mastodon halberd for yourself, it's going to be a farm job. And no, a farm job isn't slang for some disgusting agricultural escapade, but rather I mean you're going to have to poach these elephants until one of them is kind enough to give you their halberd. The tragedy is that even though the halberds these enemies use is massive to match their own size, same with their great shields, it's shrunk way down when we get it, obviously, but even so I've still got a soft spot for this weighty weapon, and I do mean weighty. Although a few other Dark Souls 2 halberds match its weight, none others surpass it. As far as its function, there's really nothing particularly special about it or its moveset, other than the fact that it's a superb strength weapon that deals truckloads of damage. And that, coupled with its rather fetching golden aesthetic, means that if I'm rocking a strength build and I'm in a halberd sort of mood and I've got this baby in my inventory, there's not a chance I'm using anything else. Lucerne? No. Roaring halberd? No. Halberd? No. Mastodon halberd? Yeah. Should also mention that there's a Mastodon greatsword in the game, another highly desirable weapon which kinda reminds me of the Zweihander, but with a slightly different style and different coloration of the handle. Though despite this being classed as a regular greatsword and the Zweihander being an ultra greatsword in Dark Souls 2, the Mastodon greatsword is in fact 33% heavier than the Zweihander. Is that interesting for you? Whilst you do get the privilege of witnessing the Mastodon Knights wield their titanic halberds out in the wild, sadly there are none to be found wielding the greatsword. But hey, that's okay, because you know what? Actually I don't have anything else to say here. Next weapon. And now we're on to Dark Souls 3. Got another weapon here which you surely do not hear discussed in the discourse of the conversation, the Dark Souls 3 conversation, but it's always been one I've been highly attracted to. It's the Warden Twin Blades. Instead of these babies getting the spotlight, everyone and their mum gave all the attention to the Sellsword Twin Blades. Rather than that being because that weapon is objectively better or anything though, biggest reason is probably due to their accessibility. If you choose the Mercenary as your starting class, then you straight up get them right from the start of the game, serving as an excellent dex weapon with a deadly moveset. And even if you don't want to be a mercenary, the Sellsword Twin Blades can be picked up just a few hours into the game in the Crucifixion Woods. The Warden Twin Blades on the other hand cannot be easily acquired. Instead, got to do another farm job on the highly dangerous Grave Warden enemies. Apparently the ones in the Cathedral of the Deep can drop this weapon, though I've never had any luck with that. But if you're as far into the game as the Untended Graves, there are a handful of Grave Wardens here to farm, though be warned.
It may take a while.
In my experience, the drop rate for these things is remarkably low, but there are some good things that just don't come easy. Visually, these things are the Sellsword Twin Blades' sharper and more wicked cousin. In fact, they'd be right at home in Bloodborne with the stained bandages wrapped around the handles. Visually, they're the Blades of Mercy's sharper and more wicked nephew. Visuals aside though, the thing that has always most attracted me to the Warden Twin Blades over the Sellswords is the fact that they do a tidy amount of bleed build up too. From there you can infuse them with a blood gem for even more effective exsanguination, go the sharp gem route to get them up to A scaling index, or do whatever the hell else you want. The choice is yours. That's the wonderful thing about the Souls games. It's great fun to set your sights on some rare weapon you've never used before, work on acquiring it one way or another, and then see what all the fuss is about. And I have great memories of going through that exact process with the Warden's twin blades. Would be nice if it wasn't such a bitch to farm, but in this case, I'd say the juice certainly is worth the squeeze. On to the mighty Elden Ring now, the biggest name here and the one with the widest array of weapons, lots of very cool ones too. And then Shadow of the Erdtree came out and gave us even more! And not only did we get more weapons, but new weapon classes, including one of my new favourites, Great Katanas, with my pick for number 23 being the Dragon Hunter's Great Katana. The Dragon Hunter's Great Katana is first experienced when wielded by the ancient Dragon Man, who first invades you near the Dragon Pit entrance, before then serving as the Dragon Pit boss. Not a very interesting boss, just being an NPC type fight with a draconic twist, but the wicked blade he's wielding certainly is interesting. The heaviest of the DLC's 3 great katanas and one notable for its distinct appearance, sporting the spines of gravel stones along its dreadful blade, an attribute which gives it its namesake. Gravel stones are of course required for crafting dragon wound grease as well as ancient dragon bolt pots, and their implementation into the build of this blade gives it a significant damage buff against dragons. Now, normally I don't have a whole lot of time for weapons with a gimmick, quirk or specialisation, because in this game you don't fight one type of thing, do you? You fight lots of types of things. Thus, of the 3 great katanas, I normally opt for the far more versatile Great Katana, found in Gravesite Plain near the Ghost Flame Dragon there, a weapon which is lighter and which you can customise with the affinity of your choice, rather than being stuck with the Dragon Wound slash of its more gravelly counterpart. So why the hell am I choosing this Great Katana over the others? Well, it's cause when I did my level 1 no Shadow Tree Blessings run of the DLC and I got to Bale, the Dragon Hunter's Great Katana was a godsend. The extra damage buff against dragon enemies is huge. I was able to get big bleeds off a couple of times throughout this long fight. The weapon is big and heavy enough to do good posture damage, and its ability to also deliver thrust attacks was ideal because Bale takes extra damage from thrusts. The sword's best feature of all, however, is its aforementioned Ash of War, Dragon Wound Slash. Solid strategy in this fight is to just focus on Bale's big, ugly head. But on the occasions where he's being a bit shy and wants to keep his distance, there is nothing better than a Dragon Wound Slash to the face for some much needed extra damage to get Bale one step closer to his stagger and maybe even death. I've heard people complain about the fact that this weapon does not have any arcane scaling, and I get that, because it means it's far from an ideal match for anyone wanting to throw out all those wicked Dragon Communion incantations that require sky-high arcane to use. And with this being a somber weapon, you cannot imbue it with the occult affinity either. Me myself personally though, as a person, I don't care about that. In fact, other than these clips which I took specifically for this video, I'd be lying if I said I'd ever use this weapon at all outside of the Bale boss fight. I'm not putting it in my list because I think it's a great all-round weapon, or because it's the right weapon for everyone. I'm putting it here because it was there for me when I needed it most. When I, like a dumbass, decided it would be a good idea to take on Bale at level 1 with no blessings, it wasn't a good idea. We're going to follow that up with another weapon from Shadow of the Erdtree, if you don't mind. It's the Horned Warrior Sword. Elden Ring's DLC ramped the difficulty way the fuck up. Even if you're buff as hell upon entering into the realm of Shadow for the first time, you're most likely still going to have a tough one taking down some of the new enemy types it throws at you, and that's without even getting into the bosses. I still remember the bloody hiding that first curse blade gave me. Couldn't believe it, I was just sitting there like this. I got roasted, and then I got literally roasted by this big bastard of a furnace golem. If you think things are going to settle down a bit upon entering into Ballarat though, think again my fine feathered friend, because this place has a couple of these horny fellas stomping round town and their crazy combos will leave you gasping for less. Would you please stop? There are two different Horned Warrior weapons, one of which is the Horned Warrior's Greatsword, another beast of a weapon which is essentially a larger version of the regular sword. Sadly though, can't get your hands on one of these puppies until literally the end of the DLC, where it's a guaranteed drop from that guy who shoots tornadoes at you. The Horned Warrior's sword, however, can be acquired from the first enemy you see wielding them, and indeed it is actually a paired weapon. I remember spotting the weapon in my inventory and thinking it looked really cool, but that I wanted to dual wield it with another one, and so I went and farmed for another one only for me to realise that you don't actually need it, because you've already got two swords there for the price of one. I have never felt like such a big fool in all my life, and from that day onwards, my wife won't even look at me in the eye. I'm not married. Look, I mean there's no getting round it, this pair of curved swords is, IMH opinion, about as good as curved swords get. Very swift moveset when dual wielded, making it nothing short of a pleasure to use against the DLC's toughest new enemies. One mildly surprising and slightly disappointing aspect of the Horned Warrior's swords is that even though it has a faith requirement to use, its basic attacks don't actually do any holy damage, and nor can you put the weapon along an affinity of your choice due to it being somber. Its unique Ash of War, however, Horn Calling, absolutely does do pure holy damage and even scales with your faith stat. Even though this Ash of War looks very cool and flashy, I was more impressed at just how effective it was. Just lock onto an enemy, hit L2 and watch them be impaled by a sprouting mass of golden horns from the ground. It does have somewhat limited range, but being able to throw this out when an enemy was out of melee range was a blessing. I don't have anything much more to say about the Horned Warrior's swords, to be honest. It doesn't carry any historical significance like some of the other weapons I have on my list, and there's nothing especially wild about its design. It's just an excellent weapon that's fun and effective to use. Oh yeah, I am pleased to present my first but not last weapon from Dark Souls 1. It's the Barbed Straight Sword. I'm sure I'm not alone when I say that when I think of the Barbed Straight Sword, I immediately think of Kirk, Knight of Thorns, garbed in his distinctive set of black thorny armour, the only armour set in the game which deals contact damage when rolling. They even brought it back for Elden Ring Night Rain, though it retains none of its thorny properties here. For a lot of us, Dark Souls 1 is more than just one of the greatest and most influential games of all time. It's also a collection of memories, especially from our first playthroughs. Back when the game's world layout, mechanics and lore still felt so alien and overwhelming, and back in the days where Souls-like was not yet an established genre. Many of those major memories pertain to particular bosses, or the feeling of first walking into the likes of Anor Londo or Ash Lake. But you've also got to give credit to the many smaller, less dramatic memories too, like your first time desperately trying to navigate your fucking way through the depths, only to get invaded by a mysterious black armoured devil, Kirk, wielding his barbed straight sword, one which even causes bleed build-up on attack. In fact, this is the only straight sword in the game which causes bleed. Look, before anyone gets too baffled at my inclusion of this weapon here, I'll hold my hand up. I'll hold both hands in the air, and admit that it's nowhere near to being one of the best weapons in the game. Heck, it's not even the best straight sword in the game. Hell, it's probably not even in the top 5 best straight sword in Dark Souls 1. But do I love using it? Hell yeah. Whenever I pass through the depths in the early game, I always make sure I am in human form so that Papa Kirk will visit me, and I always cross my fingers that he drops the barbed straight sword here so that I don't need to wait till much later in the Demon Ruins or Lost Izalith. I like that the sword does bleed, I enjoy its simple moveset, I like that you can infuse it with other elements, and I love its dark design, how crude and cruel it looks, both in this game and in Dark Souls 3, where it appears once more, and where I am also often to be found wielding it, even though, yet again, not in the top 5 best straight swords in that game either. A similar sort of sword design would later feature in Elden Ring, the chosen weapon of the loathsome Dung Eater, his Sword of Mylos, a grim greatsword literally fashioned from the spine of a deformed giant. The Sword of Milos may be more outlandishly crude in its design, and sure, it may be much bigger and heavier than its smaller spiritual predecessor, but sometimes less is more, and you know, sometimes you just want to use a weapon because you damn well like it. Its competitors be damned. At number 20, I have chosen a katana from Elden Ring. Not a great katana, but still a great katana nonetheless. It's the Nagakiba. I was curious if the word Nagakiba had a direct translation into English, and so I plugged it into Google Translate and got this. And so I had another go, but specified Japanese this time, and got this instead. Now that's more like it. I do love the Nagakiba long time, you'd better believe it. Instead of this weapon being wielded by any boss, it actually belongs to a staunch ally, Bloody Finger Hunter Yura. In fact, killing Yura in one of his forms or finishing his questline is the only way to get your hands on this distinctive weapon from the Land of Reeds. Elden Ring has a diverse selection of katanas you can get a hold of, and some exotic ones too, ones imbued with magic, fire or ice lightning. And of course Malenia's famous weapon is technically a katana even if it does lack a hilt, a feature which Fromsoft first did many years before in Demon's Souls, with the katana in that game literally called hiltless. Now Elden Ring's more exotic katanas are great and everything, but sometimes I'm a simple man with simple tastes, and what I love about the Nagakiba in particular is its length. Like all Elden Ring katanas other than the Serpent Bone and Dragon Scale blades, the Nagakiba deals bleed build-up on hit, but fancy elements and ailments aside, the thing's just damn long, pretty much being a cross between a katana and a spear, but retaining its slenderness in comparison to the far wider great katanas featured in the game's DLC. Part of the appeal of the Nagakiba for me certainly is the dude who wields it, because I think Yura's a super cool character who's really well voice acted, which does make it something of a shame that if you want this weapon really early on, you do need to end him, ideally here near Agil Lake. Moonveil is great, sure, and Rivers of Blood and its savage Ash of War is a fan favourite, I get it. But sometimes you want to go for something a bit less obvious, something with just a bit more subtlety, not to mention something far more customisable than those other two, and Nagakiba, I choose you. I do. At number 19 I have Elden Ring's Starfists of all things. The Starfists are something of an outlier in my list, not because there's anything super special about them, but rather because there isn't, at least visually. I mean, it literally is just a pair of round iron balls with spikes on them. It's straight up the same weapon as the iron balls, but with spikes. You could say the Starfists are to the iron balls what the spiked cestus is to the cestus. What a strange sentence. The Starfists are essentially what the Morning Star would be if it were a fist weapon. Do you follow? No? Okay. How else can I put this? The Starfists are to the... So what gives here? Oi, Candle Type 1A, you're a buffoon! What the hell do you think you're doing putting so humble and clumsy a weapon in this video, you jerk? Is what I imagine you're all screaming right now into your television sets. Well, simply put, the Starfists are one of my favourite weapons because, surprisingly, they're really fucking good. Funnily enough, I had hundreds of hours clocked into Elden Ring before I ever even thought to use this weapon. In fact, when I finally did get the urge to try them out, I had to look up where to find the damn things, that being near the Colosseum in Leyndell. But when I took them into battle, I quickly realised that I should have done so a long time ago because they're bloody strong. Super light, great damage, and they do inherent bleed build-up, meaning you can infuse them with a blood affinity for even greater bleeds, or make them cold so that you're doing both bleed and frost build-up. My favourite thing about the Starfists, however, is their speed. The quick R1 combos they can throw out sure are nice and all, but their charge attacks are something else. Due to them being a fist weapon, the Starfist's charge attack animation is perversely fast. But rather than that speed being counterbalanced by less than impressive damage, nope, amazing damage and great posture damage. And I can pretty much say the same thing about the jump attacks. Just as with the Dragon Hunter's great katana, the Starfists were invaluable during my Shadow of the Erdtree level 1 run, where they helped me take down the Golden Hippo, Meter and Commander Gaius. Despite my self-imposed restrictions there, I I was still doing ridiculous damage with this weapon. It was almost obscene. I was offended. I was personally offended by it. And so there you have it. The Star Fists are one of my favourite Fromsoft weapons. Not for style, but for might. I think extraordinarily highly of Dark Souls 3's Lothric Knights. They look great and they fight great. But as you're advancing through the high wall of Lothric, you may just hear the ominous metallic footsteps of some armoured behemoth coming down from below, and indeed, a winged knight prowls the plaza amidst scores of empty armour sets, a pseudo-angelic predator searching for prey to vaporise with its divine powers of light. This winged knight wields a winged knight halberd, but unless you're willing to take on the dancer early, you're not going to be seeing another one of these brutes for a damn while. Once you do make it into Lothric Castle proper though, you are introduced to another, but this time it ain't a halberd in its hands, but the winged knight twin axes. Very first thing that occurred to me when I saw these axes were just how interesting and unusual they look. Rather than there being a straight edge to their blades, they are indented, giving them a very intriguing shape. They look surprisingly big too when your character is holding them. The item description even says these weapons are more befitting an executioner than a knight, calling them beheading axes. Pretty gnarly stuff. Just as with the winged knight halberds, if you want to claim these axes for your own, gonna have to get farming this guy up on the battlements. Something many people were disappointed with about Dark Souls 3 was that it ditched the power stancing mechanic featured in Dark Souls 2, drastically reducing the fun and effectiveness of dual wielding weapons. There still are special dual wielding movesets, but they're consigned to specific doubled weapons like the Dranghammers, the Dancer's enchanted swords, and yes, the winged knight twin axes. The moveset is pretty much what you'd expect from a set of weapons of this nature, featuring powerful sequences of horizontal chops and vertical slams, and for as rare and unusual as this weapon is, does get upgraded with regular old titanite, so hey, feel free to infuse it with a gem of your choice to maximise your damage output. The really special thing about the winged knight twin axes has to be their skill, chain spin, allowing you to emulate the same panic-inducing move used by the winged knights themselves, allowing you to pirouette with gay abandon until you just can't pirouette with gay abandon no more. Elden Ring would later bring the same sort of thing back in its DLC with the Death Knight's twin axes and its blink bolt skill, but I myself still prefer the OG from Dark Souls 3. Elden Ring again, and here I'm going to chuck in something rather subtle and refined, the Cleanrot Knight's Sword. I've picked this rather humble and, dare I say, plain weapon for pretty much the same reason I picked the Dragon Hunter's Great Katana. It's not because it's one that particularly appeals to me visually, or one which I just couldn't wait to use as soon as I saw it. To be honest, I barely even knew this weapon existed, because rather than it being one you find in a designated spot, only way to get it is via a rare drop from a sword-wielding Cleanrot Knight. The one outside the prayer room site of grace in Elfale is very handy for farming. No. The reason I've got the Cleanrot Knight's sword down as one of my damn favourites is because it is the weapon that got me through the fight with promised consort Radahn at level 1. Throughout the nearly 2 weeks, yes, 2 weeks that it took me to bring down the incestuous general and his obnoxiously long-haired brother, I tried my hand at a number of weapons. Starfists, spears, the Great Katana, the Misericord, and probably a couple more that I can't even remember. Some weapons worked better than others, but nothing was quite giving me the edge I needed to overcome such a disgustingly difficult challenge. In my desperation, I took to the net for help, for inspiration, and inspiration is what I received when I saw someone using the Cleanrot Knight's sword. Not a hefty weapon, no fancy unique Ash of War, no unique properties, not even a very distinctive design, but none of that mattered. What did matter is that it's very light, it deals excellent damage, it's very fast, it's deceptively long, has low stat requirements, and as it turns out is pretty much the perfect weapon for punishing a boss like Promised Consort Radahn, and for sneaking in moves between his attacks. Just about as soon as I tried this weapon out on this most challenging of Fromsoft foes, I knew I'd finally found the edge, or should I say point, that I needed, and just like that. A week later, after about 20 more hours worth of attempts, sure, I took the big bastard of a boss down, letting me finally, get on with my life. The Cleanrot Knight's Sword may not be the most exotic weapon in Elden Ring, and it may not be the one that's most interesting and fun to use, but it is deceptively superb in its simplicity, and I do now consider it to be one of my favourite weapons. Dark Souls 3 is very widely considered to be a game with a lot of stellar bosses and very few bad ones. I mean, there's the Ancient Wyvern, which is pretty crappy in a way, though on the other hand, well, the boss itself is shit. Conceptually, the whole thing's actually kinda cool, having you run and fight your way through this large level whilst trying not to get roasted to death by the Wyvern before you can initiate that satisfying yet also kind of disappointing plunge attack. Then there's the Deacons of the Deep, which is far more of a weak fight than a bad one. It's not terrible, it's just nothing special. Then there's the Curse-Rotted Greatwood, which might be a bit of a bollock to fight, but with the sheer spectacle of the battle, somewhat makes up for how much of a chore it can be. As far as the base game is concerned though, other than those, the rest of the fights are at worst decent, and at best, S tier. So why am I having a boss discussion in the middle of a weapons video? Well, 1, because I fucking feel like it, and 2, because my pick for number 16 pertains to a boss which never features on anyone's favourite boss lists, but which I really like anyway. Vort, wielding his great hammer. Very simple boss, but pretty much exactly the right level of difficulty for where he sits in the game, and he also introduces you to a status effect which was brand new to Dark Souls 3, Frostbite. He uses Frostbite extensively in Phase 2, where his entire body has a frigid, misty aura radiating from it, and where he can even throw out a Frost Breath attack. But even in Phase 1, his hammer causes frost buildup right from the start, if you're unfortunate enough to get caught by it. And that's why I like this weapon, because of its bigness and its frostiness. I actually played through Dark Souls 3 a bunch of times without ever trying this weapon out for some reason. You get Vort's soul after beating him, but at that point you won't have the transposing kiln, and so can't do much with it. And by the time you do get the transposing kiln, you might have found some other cool weapon to focus on. When I did eventually give Vort's great hammer a ruddy good go though, when I was running a strength build, I kicked myself for not trying it out earlier. Even though you can get it fairly early, it has a rather steep strength requirement of 30, though of course you can mitigate this by two-handing it when your strength is as low as 20, and it is well worth doing that because this hefty hammer packs a powerful punch. Slam. Even raw power aside, it does Frostbite build-up, a status effect otherwise mainly associated with dexterity-oriented weapons, whereas with this weapon you get to take advantage of Frostbite even if you're rocking a pure strength build. The weapon even gives off the same frosty aura as it does when Vort wields it. The downside is that it is a boss weapon, meaning you can't infuse it with any gems, and instead of its skill being some savage animalistic frost charge or frost breath like the kind that Vort does, it's just perseverance, which is boring as fuck. Even so, still not enough to dampen my affection for this behemoth of a hammer. Comes from a really cool boss, it can easily carry you through the early to mid game, it lets you use frost, super strong, really big, great fun to use. What more could a boy ask for? Here we go then. Took a wee while for me to get there, but we're at our first but not last Bloodborne weapon of the day, and it's a good one. It's the almighty Beast Cutter from the Old Hunters DLC. Something I love about a few of the DLC weapons is that their designs are meant to harken back to an even more brutal and bloody era than the one we already find ourselves in the base game. That's why we're hit with the likes of the Whirligig Saw, the Boomhammer, the Bloodletter, and yes, the Beast Cutter, essentially an infinitely more terrifying version of the infinitely more subtle and refined Threaded Cane. Bloodborne is a game with tremendous enemy variety, even without taking the Chalice dungeons into consideration, but probably my single favourite enemy in the whole game is the titular Old Hunters, maddened, murderous, blood-drunk brutes, trapped in an extra-dimensional hell, the greatest and most terrible of all hunts. They are considerably more dangerous, detailed and enjoyable to fight than the NPC-style duels against the based game hunters, and the antiquated weaponry they wield plays a significant part of their appeal. The very first Old Hunter you encounter upon entering into the Hunter's Nightmare does indeed wield a Beast Cutter, a thick heavy cleaver designed for cutting into the hard hides of the toughest beasts. Switch to its trick form however and behold its true glory, a long segmented whip, or perhaps more accurately in this case due to its thickness and heaviness, chain, bladed and barbed to aid in the slaying of all things bestial. The Beast Cutter pretty much has it all: strength, range and the ability to take out hordes of enemies at a time, not with skill and finesse, but with strength and savagery. The Beast Cutter even sounds savage as you swing the chain from beast to beast. It's a sick fucking weapon. I love that it's the very first new weapon you see upon entering into this awesome DLC, and it's one of my all-time faves. Well, Demon Souls, eh? Look, the Souls progenitor has a bunch of great weapons which are fun to use, many of which would go on to re-feature in the Dark Souls trilogy, and many which would not. That said, there are very few weapons in this game that I honestly love or really like enough to call them any of my all-time favourites, with one exception: the large Sword of Moonlight. I think this might just be Fromsoft's most recognisable weapon, thanks to its many iterations and appearances in both previous and later Fromsoft games, though while it get the, in my opinion, better name of Moonlight Greatsword in Dark Souls, it's the large Sword of Moonlight in Demon Souls. Of course, Dark Souls 2 had the Blue Moon Greatsword as well, but that weapon is merely the shorter, fatter and faker version of the genuine article, with no magical properties to speak of. Yes indeed though, I believe that when most people think of the Moonlight Greatsword, they think magic, because that's what this weapon is all about in Dark Souls and Elden Ring. Going for an intelligence build and you fancy a big whopper of a sword to go along with it to complement your sorcery, Moonlight Greatsword's got you covered, and much the same can be said about the Darkmoon Greatsword from Elden Ring. In Demon Souls though, no. In Demon Souls, the large Sword of Moonlight is a pure faith weapon, having S scaling with faith and no scaling whatsoever with any other stats. Yes, it does still deal magic damage, but that's because as far as I know, Demon Souls only has two different elements, magic and fire, and as you may recall, Demon Souls also didn't technically have pyromancy. Yes, there were fire spells, but they were classed as magic even if they did deal fire damage. But let's not get bogged down in the details. Some weapons on this list are first seen being used by an enemy, some are used by an NPC, some are even used by bosses, but for as blue, beautiful and majestic as it may be, the large Sword of Moonlight's beginnings are considerably more squalid, being suspended above the swamp of sorrow whilst being sucked on by a slimy society of slugs. Got to cut it down and then retrieve it from the swamp, and from there, providing you have the 24 points in faith required to use it, away you go, and my, what a weapon. Super powerful, its damage can't be fully blocked due to it dealing pure magical damage, it's excellent at blocking magic damage, and for the remake, any debris hit with it will fizzle away to nothing, vaporised from existence by the enigmatic magics swirling within. For sure my favourite weapon in Demon Souls, and it both looks and sounds luscious as well, especially in the remake. Now for number 13, we're going to travel forward in time to Elden Ring again for a hot minute please, to discuss Vik's War Spear. Earlier on I talked about the Nagakiba, a weapon used by a very cool character who you can befriend, though there's no way to prevent him from meeting a tragic end. This weapon, however, is used by a character who we never get to talk to at all, Vike, who we instead fight twice, once in his fallen, frenzy-scorched form, and again within an Everjail where we see him as he was in his prime, as Vike the Dragon Spear, where instead of him throwing out Flame of Frenzy incantations, he uses dragon-based ones, and where instead of his War Spear being empowered by Frenzy, it's electrified by Ancient Red Lightning. In order to get his weapon though, got to beat him when he invades you in Liurnia as Festering Fingerprint Vike. Due to its size and weight, this weapon is classed as a Great Spear rather than a regular one, and as such it features a comparatively slower, heavier moveset consisting of thrusts and slashes. Its size might make you assume it would be a strength weapon, but it actually scales much better with dexterity and even a little bit with faith, which leads us onto the weapon's inner element, fire. Not just regular fire though, but frenzy fire, making it one of just 2 weapons from the entire base game which cause frenzy build-up, with the other of course being the fingerprint stone shield. And then the DLC introduced the Madding hand weapon. The frenzy aspect of Vike's War Spear makes it incredibly effective against anything human shaped. But even if you're fighting something which is totally immune to frenzy, you've still got a great capacity for fire damage to tide you over too. And let's not forget Frenzy Flame Thrust, its blisteringly effective Ash of War which also leaves behind embers of yellow flame to cause yet more damage and frenzy to enemies within range. Sure, you can't end up frenzying yourself if you get a bit too fast and loose with it, but as long as you behave yourself, you'll be fine. To be honest, even for as excellent a weapon as Vike's War Spear is, until a few months ago I probably would not have classed it as a personal favourite, but then Elden Ring Night Rain came out and I met Libra. Libra is one of the hardest Night Lords for sure, but Everdark Libra is on another fucking level of torment. I'm passably decent at fighting it nowadays, but it took many attempts before I got to that point, because this boss seems almost designed for things to spiral utterly out of control if you let them. To the point where you can easily be left just struggling to even stay alive, never mind being able to deal any real damage to Libra. However, if I'm doing an Everdark Libra run, the anxiety of facing this absolute dick of a demon can be lessened somewhat if I'm lucky enough to find myself Vike's War Spear, because it does great damage to Libra, who you can even frenzy, and it's even excellent for making quick work of those infernal condemned the boss loves summoning, then immediately summoning again just as soon as you manage to kill them all, and then again, and so forth. For these reasons, yep, Vike's War Spear gets a spot in Candle's Armoury of Fame. But now, back to Dark Souls 3. I enjoy Gale. Slave Knight Gale. Cool character and very helpful against the black storm of flaming fuckery that is Black Flame Frida. But as a boss, easily in the top 10, even arguably deserving of the number 1 spot. He's an incredibly tragic character, and your reunion with him at the close of the Ring City DLC is bleak, depressing and beautiful. By that point he has grown in size, turned semi-bestial, and pretty much lost his mind after who knows how many eons of consuming living flesh in a desperate attempt to become a vessel for what remains of the Dark Soul, so as to deliver himself and his now cursed blood to his lady in order for her to paint a fresh new reality away from the apocalyptic murk of the present. It ain't just Gale's body which has been warped and ravaged by time, however, it's his weapon too, his greatsword. Literally the Executioner's greatsword, except chipped, rusted and broken. It even has identical stat requirements to the sword on which it's based. Though when fully upgraded, its scaling makes it more of a quality weapon than a pure strength one. It has a fairly standard greatsword moveset, though one way in which it differs from the Executioner's greatsword is that it's capable of launching thrust attacks, with the broken end of the blade now forming a crude point in contrast to the original's flat end. Basic moveset aside though, the weapon's unique skill is where things get really fun, allowing you to perform dramatic flips and then follow them up with wild spins or savage forward lunges. These techniques very much mirror the manner of movements exhibited by Gale in his first form, where he's still bounding round the ashy wasteland on all fours before becoming empowered by the blood of the Dark Soul in Phase 2. Profoundly fun weapon to use, and even more so if you stick on the slave set and pretend to be Gale. It's a battered, broken old sword which, through its appearance, tells the story of a battered, broken old slave knight who continued carrying out his lady's wishes until the end of time, where the world had turned to little more than dust and ash. I've got all these clothes here to dry, but how? How do I achieve my goals? Ah, I know. I'll use a cleansing rod. Actually, nah, that would never work. What a stupid fucking idea. How about a cleansing rod? Oh wait, no, I just had that idea. I've got it. I'll use a washing pole.png. Folks, what I'm trying to say is that my pick for number 11 is the washing pole, and that's humour. First things first, why the fuck's it called a washing pole? It's not a washing pole, it's a long sharp katana. That said, in truth I actually really like the name of this sword. With a name like that you would expect some sort of joke weapon like the handmaid's ladle or the plank shield. But then you actually see the damn thing and think, hold on, that might just be the sickest katana from any Fromsoft game, or at least that's what I think. It's not super easy to get, not being lootable or farmable from anywhere. Instead, have to join the Forest Hunters clan, befriend Shiva of the East, then travel on down to Blighttown where he can be found chilling with his bodyguard, holding a veritable treasure trove of rare weapons for sale too, one of which is the washing pole, the most expensive of his wares, costing you the princely sum of $20,000. Best make sure you're sufficiently statted out too, because thanks to the extravagant length of this weapon, as well as it requiring 16 points in dex, got to have 20 points in strength to one-hand it, and it weighs over 30% more than the next heaviest katana too. Regrettably, that extra weight does not make it extra sturdy. In truth, the washing pole has horrendous durability, with the only weapons which are less durable than it being the crystal reinforced ones. So why the hell is it here, dumbass? Why do I like it so much compared to the likes of the Uchi Katana, or the also pretty damn sick Chaos Blade? Well, I like it because it's long. That's what she said. It's just a fucking babe of a katana, what do you want me to say? And unlike the Chaos Blade, you can put it along any upgrade path you like, making it pleasingly versatile. I like the washing pole for very similar reasons to why I like the Nagakiba, but an extra nice thing about this weapon is that it appears in all 3 Dark Souls games. Apparently there's a chance for it to drop from some chest in Dark Souls 2's Dragon Shrine, though you can also get it as a reward for killing the twin pursuers in Ranglake Castle's throne room on New Game Plus if you've got the stones for it. And in Dark Souls 3 it can be purchased from the Shrine Maiden after giving her the Easterner's ashes found in Anor Londo, a clear reference to Shiva from Dark Souls 1. Though, as anyone who's ever pissed Shiva off will know, he doesn't actually use the washing pole when fighting. He uses the Marakumo, which in Dark Souls 3 is solely wielded by Alva when he invades. All that jibber jabber aside though, yeah, the washing pole is without a doubt one of my favourites. I love the way it looks, and I enjoy tailoring it to whatever type of build I am rocking. And the fact that it's been a staple in every Dark Souls game also does a lot to elevate it in my eyes, though not quite enough for it to make it into the top 10, which we will now get onto. We have now begun the final countdown from 10 to 1, the cream of the crop, and to kick things off, I'm starting with the Axe of Godfrey. Godfrey is one of the greatest bosses Fromsoft have ever made. He's just a pleasure to fight and is balanced to a T. He's the Gale of Elden Ring. Things get a wee bit more complicated in Phase 2, yes, but even so, God tier boss. Before that though, within the Erdtree Sanctuary you have to fight a golden spirit version of Godfrey. And even aside from the spirit aspect, there are 2 main differences to his appearance, one major and the other a bit more subtle. The first is that his spectral beast regent, Serosh, is nowhere to be found. The second difference is that his mighty axe is whole, still possessing both its bladed edges. During the long march, however, after turning tarnished, Godfrey's axe was damaged, with one bladed side breaking off. Much like Gale's greatsword, this is a weapon with a story. It's the weapon Godfrey wields against you at the foot of the Erdtree, and it's the one you get yourself when you trade in Godfrey's remembrance to Enya at the Round Table Hold. Rather surprising thing about the Axe of Godfrey is that while you might expect it to be a pure strength weapon, it's really not. It starts with just a D scaling in strength and dex, and even at plus 10, that strength scaling only gets bumped up to a C. It is classed as a colossal weapon though, in comparison to the also awesome Axe of Godric, which is classed as a great axe. To be honest, I came really close to putting the Axe of Godric in my list too, but I didn't want to include both of them and so just opted for Godfrey's. It may not be the weapon that we all wanted with an S scaling in strength or anything, but I enjoy the shit out of using this weapon nonetheless. Not just in Elden Ring but also Night Rain with its Ash of War, Regal Roar can come in particularly handy. This skill buffs your damage, can be buffed further by the Roar medallion, and it alters your R2s to these exaggeratedly long but undeniably badass attacks straight out of Godfrey's own moveset, though buffs aside, I just love that opening stomp. Again, same move that Godfrey himself does in the boss fight, and while it may not have quite the same range when you use it, it's still great for clearing out groups of enemies and letting you look like a savage whilst doing it. The Axe of Godfrey is one of my favourite weapons to come across in Night Rain, and it's my favourite colossal weapon full stop from Elden Ring. Axe of Godfrey, thy strength befits a crown. At mighty number 9, it is my esteemed pleasure to present you with the Lothric Knight Greatsword. Dark Souls 3's Lothric Knights are a superb enemy there to scare the shit out of you when you come across them in the high wall of Lothric and beyond. You're toddling along, just holding your own against the horrible hordes of hollows, and you just manage to get past that dragon without getting baked black when running for the stairs. And just when you think you might be in the clear, a bloody Lothric Knight only goes and walks through the doorway, and then kills you. Clad in fine armour and wielding a Lothric Knight's sword. You can also find knights wielding spears and great shields who are just as, if not more formidable than their sword wielding brethren, but it's not until you ascend to Lothric Castle and its grand archives that you start coming across the ones with the great swords, and these are the ones who really put the fear into me, especially when they're being buffed up by those annoying cleric dudes. I hate that. Apparently you can buy the weapon if you complete Greyrat's side quest and then give his ashes to the Shrine Maiden, but I've never once done his questline and probably never will. Meaning, got to farm for it. Farm job. Good place to do this is just outside the Twin Princes bonfire where there's a Lothric Knight at the top of the stairs. This is a magnificent greatsword, or ultra greatsword as it's technically classed as. It doesn't have any fancy coloration or garish decoration, it just looks fucking nice. Big, sleek and powerful, just the way I like it. All that said, there is something special about this weapon even when compared to its Lothric Straightsword and Long Spear counterparts, and that's the fact that it deals additional lightning damage. It's kind of unexpected because to look at the Lothric Knight Greatsword you probably just assume it's a straight up greatsword, but no, you've got that extra lightning there too, an indication that this weapon was used in dragon hunts back before their extinction. On top of all that niceness, this ain't no twinkling titanite piece of gear either, no. It's upgraded with regular old titanite, meaning you can infuse this weapon with gems. Can make it a lightning weapon so you do even greater lightning damage with excellent faith scaling, or why not make it magic or fire for some proper omni-elemental chaos, flattening and crushing enemy and boss alike with every swing and slam. The Lothric Knight Greatsword is one of those weapons where as soon as I saw it, I had to have it. As soon as I saw that first Lothric Knight stalking round the castle with it housed over one armoured shoulder, I thought, that's the greatsword for me, and the extra lightning damage and potential for infusions easily boost this weapon into a top 10 weapon. For number 10 we had a great axe, then number 9 was a great sword, and so now for number 8 let's have a great hammer. Let's have the Black Steel Great Hammer from Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree. Although the Realm of Shadows is host to plenty of creatures, great and small, living and undead, many locations are also packed with people, soldiers from Mesmer's army, here to lay waste to the home of the Horned Scent, to bathe the land in fire and blood in the name of Queen Marika. In addition to the regular soldiers, however, there are knights, black knights, wearing their black and gold armour, wielding their ultra heavy great shields, their distinctive twin blades, or their black steel great hammers. Enormous chunks of, well, black steel, embellished with decorative golden motifs along its curves, imbuing it with tremendous holy power. Although the black steel great hammer isn't quite the heaviest great hammer in Elden Ring, it's damn close, being only just beaten by the brick hammer and cranial vessel candle stand. Though, if given a choice between a brick on a stick, a fucking candle stand, and this glorious hunk of hammer, I know which one I'm picking. Comes with the Endure Ash of War by default, which is pretty lame, but unlike the likes of the Dragon Greatclaw, you're not stuck with it. Instead, being free to make this great hammer even greater by slapping on an Ash of War of your choice, and hey, you can even get it to A scaling in strength with the heavy affinity if you're so inclined. Additionally, the black steel great hammer has a special trick up its sleeve. I don't think hammers have sleeves as such, but my point is this: launch a cheeky wee guard counter after getting whacked by some unsuspecting sucker and then enjoy the show as the ground cracks and glows with divine light before exploding upwards. Actually looks very similar to the unique Goldbreaker Ash of War you can perform with Marika's hammer, except on a smaller scale. Elden Ring has no shortage of big chunky weapons, enormous hammers and axes with over-the-top designs and strange themes, and lots of them are great fun to use, but I'm a sucker for an appealing colour scheme. And the black and gold theme going on here is simply to die for. Same goes for the black steel great shield. I like the look and feel of this weapon so much in fact, that it's my all-time favourite great hammer or axe, if you can believe it. And with just one exception, everything beyond this point in the video is a sword of one kind or another, and some bloody nice ones too. And speaking of which, there are very few things in life that I enjoy more than a good, hard Crucible Knight. Excluding the various aspects of the Crucible moves they can throw out, depending on which one you're fighting, their movesets just consist of these honest-to-goodness sword attacks which are foundationally fun to contend with. Sure, we can all agree their input reading forward thrusts can be a bit annoying, but these are fast and engaging fights where you are given constant opportunities for punishes so long as you're decent with your dodges, and if you're more parry oriented, these fights can be a cakewalk. I enjoy the spear wielding Crucible Knights a ton, but the sword and shield ones are my favourite, so it's a good thing you can get that sword for yourself, ain't it? It's not so good that you need to fight two Crucible Knights at once to get it, but hey, what you gonna do? Just like Siluria's tree, this weapon deals additional holy damage and so requires some points in faith to wield it. Cool aspect of this though is that while this is a holy weapon, it's holy in a different way to the likes of the Golden Order Greatsword or Black Steel Greathammer. Rather than it having anything to do with Marika, the Erdtree or the Golden Order, its holiness is of a far more ancient, mysterious and primordial nature, the sword being tinted red rather than any sort of gleaming, ostentatious gold. Mind you, there's certainly nothing subtle about Ordovis's greatsword either, named after one of the two foremost among the Crucible Knights, with the other of course being Siluria, who you can fight in Deeproot depths. The weapon's moveset is pretty standard for a greatsword, but its unique Ash of War is considerably more special. Ordovis's Vortex, a chargeable propeller-esque display of primordial power. It's an immensely fun skill to chuck out any old time against any old enemy or boss. But when you've got a group of bad guys in front of you and you charge it fully up and fuck them all up in a flash of holy light, well then that right there is what I call a good time. Stats aside for a second, my number one favourite build in Elden Ring has to be the Crucible Axe set with the helmet substituted for the Omen Smirk Mask, with the Crucible Horn Shield in my offhand, and Ordovis's Greatsword in my on-hand. This isn't a weird quirky weapon, and nor is it super over the top even when taking its awesome Ash of War skill into account. It's just a damn good greatsword with an enjoyable and intriguing holy twist. At number 6 we have Morgoth's Cursed Sword, the enigmatic arcane blade wielded by the Omen King himself. Interesting thing about this weapon is that technically we see it super early on when we fight Margit's Fell Omen. The catch is that it's encased in a rocky sheath, making it look like nothing more than a wicked stick, used to deliver attacks with obnoxiously long wind-ups. Fast forward from Limgrave all the way to Grand Golden Leyndell though, to the foot of the Erdtree, and the weapon's true form is revealed, looking entirely otherworldly, like some sword-shaped slab of some shifting multi-hued extraplanetary mineral. The reason for the cursed sword's appearance is actually in its very name, with Morgott having sealed away his cursed blood within it. In stark contrast to the alien beauty of this blade of blood, however, its Ash of War, Cursed Blade Slice, is a vividly red and explosive spectacle, far more violent than elegant. Perhaps a physical expression of the burning pain and shame felt by Morgott due to his cursed nature as an omen, denied by the Erdtree he now fights to protect. The weapon can of course be created from Morgott's remembrance, though it has some bloody stiff requirements, needing 35 points in dexterity, not to mention 17 points in arcane. Other than its fiery Ash of War, this weapon doesn't deal any elemental damage, though it does cause very high bleed buildup, which I guess is where the arcane component comes in. I remember when I first saw Morgott's cursed sword, I was so entranced at how gorgeous it looked that it made me want to do a whole freaking playthrough with it. Unfortunately, New Game Plus aside, you literally can't do a whole playthrough with it because you can't get the sword till after you conquer Leyndell, but even so, this is not only my favourite boss weapon in Elden Ring, but it's my favourite Elden Ring weapon full stop. In fact, even though we're not at number 1 yet, I would go as far as to say that this is Fromsoft's best looking weapon, which really is saying something. This isn't the weapon I've used most in Elden Ring, or the one which I think is the strongest, or one that I think is suitable for most builds. Instead, I just really freaking like it. Time for another Bloodborne weapon, and again it's one from the Old Hunters DLC. We covered the barbaric brutality of the Beast Cutter, but for number 5, I am of course going to talk about the Whirligig Saw. Whereas you can find Old Hunters using the Beast Cutter, Beast Hunter Safe and Boomhammer, you don't see any of them using the Whirligig Saw against you. Though if you summon him in for the fight against Lawrence, you'll see that it is Volter's weapon of choice. Your first introduction to the Whirligig Saw, however, will be when you find it tucked away in the Hunter's Nightmare, and from there the hunt can truly begin, right in time for the Ludwig battle too. We covered the extra savage nature of many of the Old Hunter weapons earlier, but truly the Whirligig Saw is on another level, crossing the line from brutality into all-out butchery. The weapon's basic form is actually comparatively tame, being a heavy mace of bronze designed for the smashing and pummeling of beasts into soft pulp. It's decent enough and certainly effective. Its nature well reflecting the fact that this is a strength weapon through and through, starting with B scaling in strength and ending in S once upgraded to plus 10. Fuck that though, who cares, cause hit that transform button and watch the head of the mace get jammed into the circular saw on your character's back, transforming it from a tool into a machine. One not made merely for smashing but for grinding foes into gristle and meat. The visceral feeling of running round town, tearing into beasts and bosses with a Whirligig Saw is what Bloodborne is all about. Watching the blood fly and hearing and feeling the grinding of metal through your speakers. Now each slam is accompanied by the whirling of the saw, upping the weapon's damage and range. But if the opportunity presents itself, forget swinging it around or slamming it down. Hold that L2 button, walk forward and let the carnage be done. Revel in the bestial bloodshed of Bloodborne's sickest, most obscenely over-the-top weapon. Fromsoft would bring back the same sort of weapon idea in Elden Ring with Giza's Wheel, which is also very cool, though one which is comparatively more manual next to the mechanical mayhem of the Whirligig Saw. Another fantastic thing about this weapon is that rather than it just being a gimmick that's fun to try out for a short while before you switch back to something more serious, no, it's actually one of the best weapons in the game and is capable of absurd damage. Who doesn't love a great sword? Me, I don't love a great... Well, I do love a great sword, is what I'm trying to say. But who doesn't not love an ultra great sword? Me again, I think. Which brings me to my fourth favourite Fromsoft weapon, the Crypt Black Sword. Even though there were a few big ass greatswords in the first Dark Souls game, it didn't officially have a weapon class called Ultra Greatswords, that only got introduced in the second game. But rather than this class solely being introduced as a way to distinguish between regular sized greatswords and bigger ones, FromSoft said, you know, if we're going to introduce this new class, then we better go all in and introduce some obscenely big swords, one of which is indeed the Crypt Black Sword. And while we're on about its length, let's not forget that it's thick as hell too. This is one thick bitch of a sword. Jesus. This weapon can be created by defeating the Rotten on New Game Plus for the Old Dead One soul, which can then be traded into Weaponsmith Ornifex for the Crypt Black Sword. The Old Dead One soul is most likely a reference to Gravelord Nito from the first game, just like how the Old Witch soul is a reference to the Witch of Izalith, and how the Old Pale Drake soul is a reference to Seath. Trading in the Old Pale Drake soul will get you the Moonlight Greatsword, a weapon which you could of course get by cutting off Seath's tail in Dark Souls 1, though instead of the Old Dead One soul giving you something like the Gravelord Greatsword, which you can get by joining Nito's Gravelord Covenant in the first game, you get a completely new weapon with one of the coolest names I have ever heard. Crypt Black Sword, hell yeah. The reason it's called a Black Sword is because, 1. It's black as hell, but going deeper still, the description states, this sword has never seen the light of day and is steeped in dark. The description also specifically mentions the Undead Crypt, even though you get it from the Rotten who's found in the Black Gulch. But if you succeed in pissing off Grave Warden Agdane in the Undead Crypt enough for him to want to fight you, you'll see that he is actually the original wielder of this weapon. Mind you, visually it also seems to be a reference to the sword Dragon Slayer used by Guts in the Berserk manga. The two don't look identical, but they do look remarkably similar. And if anything, that just makes me appreciate this weapon even more because Berserk is awesome. Appearances are great and all, but it sure does help if the weapon's strong as fuck too, so it's pretty nice that the Crypt Black Sword is considered to be one of the best weapons in the game, with insane damage output and the added bonus of it doing additional dark damage. Best of all, even though it's a boss weapon, you can still infuse it with a stone of your choice. Use a Dark Knight stone for even greater dark damage, or why not infuse it with a different element altogether so that you're hitting enemies with 2 different elements at a time in addition to the massive physical damage. The Crypt Black Sword is a wildly over-the-top weapon in all regards. It's too big, it's too thick, and it's too heavy looking, and that's why I like it. It's excessive. Super fun to swing round, and it fucks shit up too. It's just about my favourite Ultra Greatsword in Dark Souls 2 and was very close to making it into the top 3 of my list, and it would have done were it not for this next weapon. Say what you want about this game, but you've got to admit it has a ton of genuinely awesome weapons, one of which is this Smelter Sword, and while we're at it, might as well include the Aged Smelter Sword in the number 3 spot too, if you don't mind. Despite what I think about the fucking nonsense that comes directly beforehand, I think the Smelter Demon is a very good boss, and again, despite what I think about the fucking nonsense that comes directly beforehand, I actually think the Blue Smelter Demon is an even better boss. I know you can get kicked out of some bars for saying that nowadays, but I mean it. After taking down the monstrous mass of flaming metal, you do of course acquire the demonic soul which gave it animation, which can be traded into straight for the Smelter Sword. Never realised this before because I've never paid much attention to Dark Souls 2's lore, but the weapon description seems to say that this was the very weapon which struck down the old Iron King before his castle sank into the ocean of magma upon which the Iron Keep was constructed. If you want the Aged Smelter Sword, got defeat the Blue Smelter Demon in the Crown of the Iron King DLC, and then instead of taking the soul to Strayed, got to take it to Ornifex. Fairly minor detail, but I really like how you have to go to different weaponsmiths to create the different weapons, as if Ornifex's greater knowledge is required to create this older sword. As far as the differences between each weapon, well, they both require 40 points in strength and 10 points in dex, though the aged variant has slightly better strength scaling. As far as movesets, they are identical. Well, nearly identical because red, blue, I love it. Look, the Smelter Sword can be described as nothing short of gnarly, as big, hot and heavy as the construct which wielded it, but my god, the aged Smelter Sword's blue aspect makes it not only brutal, but beautiful. And whereas the regular sword deals fire damage on attack and especially from its explosive R2, the aged Smelter Sword instead deals magic damage from its vivid blue flames. It's exactly the same as when you fight the blue smelter demon as a boss too. It does magic damage rather than fire damage, which can be a bit misleading. It's like when you find out that Ghost Flame in Elden Ring doesn't actually deal fire damage, but rather, again, magic damage. Out of these two ultra great swords, I'd say the aged Smelter Sword is my favourite, because again I find the magic aspect of it to be a really cool difference, and of course I think it looks better. But why choose one or the other? Why not power stance the pair of them at once? Sure, it requires 60 goddamn points in strength, but you better believe it's worth it. Crazy high physical damage, a chaotic combination of both magic and fire, the ability to throw out that explosive R2 attack whenever you want, and just the sheer flaming spectacle of running round Drang Lake with these heavy hunks of metal in each hand. This is precisely to my tastes. Bending the rules of the video a bit with me including both weapons here is my number 3 favourite, I know, but you know, who gives a fuck? I'm making the rules here. Show me in the official rulebook where it says I can't do this. Every Fromsoft Souls type game has at least one kind of especially imposing knight type enemy. Demon Souls has its red-eyed knights, Dark Souls 2 had its hide knights, Dark Souls 3 had its Lothric knights, Bloodborne had its old hunters, Elden Ring has its Crucible Knights, and Shadow of the Erdtree has its Black Knights, but for the number 2 spot, I want to mention a different Black Knight. Of course, Gwyn's Black Knights from Dark Souls 1, and of their 4 obtainable types of weapon, I am choosing the Black Knight Greatsword. First time you play Dark Souls, the early game is nothing short of terrifying. You don't know where to go. You're confused at how much damage the enemies do even with basic attacks. You don't understand half the shit you can do at bonfires, and if you're anything like me, you probably had no idea what invincibility frames were. Even within those general feelings of fear and unfamiliarity though, key moments do stand out as particularly scary, such as when you see your first Black Knight not running straight at you making a goddamn racket, but facing away from you, giving you the choice to either provoke it or turn round and pretend like you didn't see nothing. Ah, fuck it, let's fight it. How hard could it be? But then you make it a bit further into the undead parish right after travelling underneath the bridge to avoid the Hellkite Drake, whilst hopefully not having gotten yourself poisoned by some pesky pest of a rat. Jeez Louise, you say to yourself, this game's tough, and look, there's a bunch of bad men in an armoured pig through that gate, woe is me. Hold on though, what's this? There's a wee tower I can climb, who knows what's up there? Maybe a treasure chest, or a shortcut, or a bonfire, or maybe actually no, go fuck yourself, because it's another Black Knight, except this one's wielding a sword nearly twice the size of the one from earlier. I'm upset. Except I'm actually not upset, because even when I'm getting utterly rent asunder by this enemy, I like it. It arouses me. Because folks, the Black Knight Greatsword truly is just about the sickest weapon to appear in any Fromsoft game. Really cool thing about it too is that if you get lucky, the enemy can drop the weapon for you right here near the start of the game, though I believe the chance is about 1 in 5. Unfortunately, if it doesn't drop it, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm pretty sure you literally don't have a single other chance to get it until you make it to the Kiln of the First Flame, where there is the game's only respawning Black Knight with a Greatsword. Even if you do get lucky, pretty steep stat requirements for the early game. Got to have 32 points in strength to one-hand it, and 18 points in dex to handle it at all. Me myself personally though, if I am fortunate enough to get a BKGS as early as the Undead Parish, then I'm making it my sole bloody mission to level up those two stats as quickly as possible so that I can get flattening enemies and bosses with my fancy new sword. The Black Knight Greatsword has a wide arcing swing with tremendous range, can deliver powerful thrusts after rolls, and it can throw out devastating downward chops with its running attack. Its R2s are where the sword is at its most devastating though, with the two-handed R2 being a sort of spinning upward sweep which, as well as dealing crazy damage, also knocks the enemy back. You might be surprised at just how much stuff you can one-shot with this attack. Honestly though, my favourite of its attacks is the one-handed R2. It looks so fucking cool and seems to be what the Elden Ring Ash of War Giant Hunt is based on. This would be an awesome attack with any weapon, but when the upward thrust is coming from a greatsword this big and badass looking, chef's kiss. Chef's kiss for sure. Now you can also get the Black Knight Greatsword in Dark Souls 2, except it's not the Black Knight Greatsword at all. It actually looks far more similar to the regular Black Knight sword from Dark Souls 1, whereas Dark Souls 2's Black Knight Ultra Greatsword has far more in common with the Black Knight Greatsword from Dark Souls 1. Minus the badass unique moveset, and also all Black Knight weapons do additional fire damage in Dark Souls 2. And also for some reason I've never been able to work out, you can farm these dumb sugar glider things outside Aldea's Keep for literally any Black Knight weapon. How the hell did we go from, if this guy doesn't drop it, then you have to wait another 30 hours for another chance, to, you can just farm it from these random green monkeys for the entire set. The Black Knight Greatsword came back once more for Dark Souls 3, where they can be farmed from the Black Knight near Farron Keep or from the one in Untended Graves, and thankfully after the underwhelming treatment it got in Dark Souls 2, they returned it back to its former glory in the third installment. This greatsword is an undeniably badass weapon with a killer moveset, wielded by a killer enemy and with a killer design, and it is my number one favourite weapon from the Dark Souls games. But we've still got one more weapon to cover, and it ain't a Dark Souls, Demon Souls, or even an Elden Ring one. Oh baby, here we are at my all-time favourite Fromsoft weapon, and it's a good one. Though in a sense, it's one I've already talked about. You see, the weapon is you. Me, us, all of us. You know, think about it. In modern society, we're encouraged to... Yeah, I'm just joking. My pick is the Holy Moonlight Sword from Bloodborne. Folks, I like this weapon, okay? I wee like it. And who the hell could blame me? Yes, its iteration in the Dark Souls games were excellent, and I really like Elden Ring's Dark Moon Greatsword too, not to mention the large Sword of Moonlight, which nabbed the number 14 spots. But folks, the sickest of the Moonlight collection has got to be the Holy Moonlight Sword, the colossal blade wielded by Ludwig the Holy Blade. Not at first, of course. At first he's a braying, bucking beast, the most horrific and monstrous of all beasts, transformed into an abominable titan here in the Hunter's Nightmare, where he languishes in his corpse-strewn blood pit. In Phase 2, however, Ludwig the Accursed becomes Ludwig the Holy Blade, a being no less monstrous and malformed, but one which now exhibits a degree of transient sentience, temporary sanity brought on by the pale glow of the Holy Moonlight Sword, a weapon which you can actually see in Phase 1, but which remains dull up until its guidance is needed most by this former hero of the Healing Church. The battle against Ludwig gives you a dramatic demonstration of the Holy Moonlight Sword's power, and after taking Ludwig down you can claim the weapon as your own from what's left of his grim, pathetic remains. I remember back before the DLC came out, and folk were a bit disappointed that this game didn't seem to have a proper version of the Moonlight Greatsword in it, like everyone expected, to the extent that some concluded that Ludwig's Holy Blade must be Bloodborne's answer to the Moonlight Greatsword weapon, even if there weren't any overt lunar tones to its design. No, though, when the DLC came out, turned out that lore-wise, Ludwig's Holy Blade was merely based on the true Sword of Moonlight, this mysterious weapon infused with arcane secrets, capable of channeling the abyssal cosmos via beams and blasts of destructive eldritch energy. When I first saw this weapon in that almost impossibly sick phased transition cutscene, I could barely breathe, I was that excited. And when I was able to actually get my hands on it after the fight, I shat myself. What do you think about that? I loved the Holy Moonlight Sword pretty much straight away, though I will be honest, mechanically it is somewhat less interesting than several of the game's actual trick weapons. Instead of it transforming from one form into another, it's more akin to the likes of the Tonitrus, in that its transformed version simply enchants the sword with an element, in this case arcane, also allowing for projectiles to be hurled from the blade via R2 attacks. My personal favourite new move, however, is the L2 one, initiating an explosive AoE thrust attack which can do tremendous damage if the enemy gets hit by both the explosion and thrust. This new attack does mean that you can't use your firearm when the Holy Moonlight Sword is in its arcane state, but I'd say it's a fair trade-off. Honestly though, most of the time I don't even bother with the arcane shit, because I just really like swinging this sword around. It may lack the mechanical versatility and ingenuity of the trick weapons of the workshop, but even so I prefer the Holy Sword over the likes of the Holy Blade. As with pretty much any weapon I've featured on this video, I'm not including this one because I think it's the optimum one to use throughout the whole game. I'm including it because I love its lore implications, I love the way it's revealed, I love the way it looks, and I freaking love using it. And out of any of the hundreds of weapons to appear in any of Fromsoft's games, Bloodborne's Holy Moonlight Sword is my number one. And there you have it folks, those are my 25 favourite FromSoft weapons. I know I've not been active on YouTube recently, but rather than that being because I don't want to make videos anymore, it's just that I find it damn difficult to get motivated enough to really follow through with projects. It takes a whole lot of time and energy and writing. Even for this video I had to write a fucking 13,000 word script for it. Thankfully though, instead of this being just one more idea I'd think of and then abandon because I couldn't be arsed, as soon as I started writing it all just came pouring out. I do so enjoy writing about the various things in these games, regardless of whether it's bosses, enemies, levels, armor sets or sick weapons. Anyway, there's me rambling again, and so folks, as always, cheers for watching and cheerio.